Welcome to the Grace Hour Show, a Christian program that takes a dive into our daily challenges and helps us learn our faith in a practical way. I'm Pastor Paul Andrulonis, and I'm joined in the studio by Philippe Serradji.
Yes.
And we're excited today to continue the discussion about mental health.
Yes.
And it was a great episode yesterday with Roger and Liz and Megan Ackerman, who's a counselor. And it was just, I encourage you all to go and to watch that. And it just is a great conversation. And this week is a great conversation because it's such a impactful and important topic in our culture and in the world today of mental health, what that looks like. And we're excited to talk about it and say what God puts on our hearts in relation to it. And maybe the first thing we should say before we kind of dive into this is that neither of us are licensed counselors or therapists. We are not experts in this field of mental health by any means. We don't have medical degrees or anything like that, but we are going to speak from what we understand about our interactions with counseling people, in discussions that we've had, in the studies that we've had. We're teaching in the Bible school. I've done a little bit of study in this as it relates to biblical psychology, so coming from that frame of reference, but by no means are we claiming to be experts or saying that we have all the answers for any of these questions, but we're just discussing.
I mean, we do have all the answers. We just want to look like we do, right?
Okay, yeah. We know who to go to for the answers,
Yes.
I guess you could say.
We do have all the answers, but honestly, they are not between you and I.
The reality is nobody has all the answers for these
nobody
questions.
does, really. Yeah.
Except for the Lord. So that's kind of like an encouragement for us, I guess. Like we have the Lord that we can go to. And I think that's a great way to kind of start this conversation is that there's a lot of questions around mental health.
Yes.
What it is, what that means, self-care, why it's become such a prominent topic in our culture, in our world today, having proper mental health, generationally speaking, culturally speaking, all those dynamics. What are your thoughts, Philippe, initially just thinking about mental health in general as we kind of lay the groundwork for our discussion today?
I mean, you would have to have your head stuck in the sand not to see that it is a problem.
Yeah.
The Surgeon General, has published, so it's not just like Christians thinking, ooh, the world is bad and we need to address that and they don't have the Lord, that's why, that's not what we're saying. It's a real issue. It has become a major problem in the last 20 years. And there is many reasons for it. And there's hundreds of articles on that. It's very well documented. But what we want to say, I think we will do three things today. I think number one is we just, before I do it, so mental health, our topic today is how can I help my friends? Yeah. And in a way, that's why you and I feel comfortable talking about this, because you don't need a medical degree or counseling degree to do that. It's just we have to understand what are the parameters and also what are the solutions. Yeah. So the two things we can talk about, number one is why are we here in one way and what's the situation? Number two is how can I concretely help my friends who are going through mental health issues? And of course, we're not saying, we don't diagnose people. Like if you have friends with issues, depending on what they are, maybe, there's somebody who's depressed or down or, who's struggling with the self-image and things like this. The Bible has some answers for that, and we can go to that. And there's also many other major issues that people may need help from the medical world because there are some chemical imbalances, trauma, and those things cannot be denied as just feelings. They have to be understood as real issues that people have. And for those ones, even for those ones, if you look at the studies and if you took class in counseling, which we did, we don't have, a degree, but we took counseling classes. One thing that was surprising to me when I was taking classes like 25 years ago is how much peer counseling was helpful to people. And you get more out of a friendship talk than you would get out of a therapy talk. I was true 25 years ago. And I'll explain to you later why it's not as true as it used to be. But it still means that as friends, even the professionals realize that the support. Yeah. I mean, if you ask any surgeon or anyone or oncologist who's having a patient who's going through hard chemo series, this family support is very helpful. So much so that I don't know if you knew that, but one of the criteria is whether you're on the list or not as an organ receiver is whether or not you have family support.
Oh, wow.
Because that changes the odds of the success of the operation. So what we're saying here is we're not just saying, hey, like a group of buddies, hanging out with each other, hanging out together. But what we're saying is helping our friends is significantly more important than we can think.
Yeah.
So hence the topic today.
Yeah, and it's not the main thing is that this is not some fabrication, like you said. This is not some like crazy topic that we should ignore. But we also want to make sure we have a frame of reference, a perspective on it that is appropriate. And as you were saying before we started recording, like how can God be brought into this?
Yes.
Because there is a whole machine of how the world or how medically speaking, physiologically speaking, there are these ways that people are trying to solve and trying to help and trying to have mental health in a mechanism or in a way that is possible without God. And in some cases it's successful and in other cases it's not. And maybe because of the rate of increase in not only the diagnoses of these mental health disorders or issues, but the prescription of the drugs and the development of these drugs and how that's increased shows like maybe it's not a successful venture in trying to solve these things without God.
Yes.
And we're wanting to kind of acknowledge those things, the reality of the physiological things that can happen in the brain of a person, the neurotransmitters and the chemicals that exist in our bodies that are meant to perform particular purposes in particular situations, but then also, okay, how much of that is physiological, and maybe there's a spiritual component, maybe there's an emotional component, maybe there's a support component, like you're saying, my environment, the things that I'm consuming, the content that I'm watching, the people that I'm around, the places that I go, and how do all these things contribute to a person's mental health, and how we can help our friends know and look and see those different things and say, okay, well, when do you and we'll talk about that, all the different practical aspects of those conversations and how they go as it relates to our mental health. But do you want to list the three things you were going through a list of three things that we wanted to go over today?
Right. So the idea was at first we laying down what we hear, right? The solutions. Also, before we do the solutions, we're just laying out the idea that we have to understand that's maybe we can do it now, actually. The point is, as we said, so there is two extreme views in when we are facing as Christians mental issues, whether it could be depression, light depression, or discouragement, to call it this way, towards like real serious issues. One is completely hyper spiritualized things by saying the Lord is the one that can answer all your problems and denying the reality of the issues. Just like the way, in a way, if I'm diagnosed with cancer, I'm going through treatment. I am praying for healing. I'm trusting God for the outcome, but I'm still going through chemotherapy. So we accept that, but then when it comes down to mental issues, we don't, and that's hyper spiritualism in one way. So we don't want to go there, right? We don't. But on the other hand, we don't want also to just stay there and go with the trend of victimhood. I'm going to use the word very carefully because I know we can rub people the wrong way. But I'm telling you what I think. I'm using this word now is because so I read this article recently. It was on young people, mostly. There's many studies, but what struck me is the studies made on young girls, in particular, from the age of 20 to the age of 10 to 24. And what they're saying is the main influence in their life for the change of mental illness. And I'm talking, it's a French secular, non-Christian, study. It's not has nothing. Like if you know anything about my country, then there's no Christian influence at all. So if there was a study done by Christians, it wouldn't even come out, in the way. So
it'd be discredited before it's released or something.
So it's the government, study. It's by the actual agency of statistics of the country. So you just like would have here. It's not even a private group. It's actually a governmental health group. So, and they're saying there's a spike of 63% in the last 10 years of self-inflicted wounds from girls, young girls from age 10 to 14, 42 increase from 15 to 19, and 32 increase from 20 to 24. So the minimum increase is 30%, and the maximum increase is 60%. So if 5 years ago, 10 years ago, when you had 100 victims on self-inflicting wounds, now you have 160.
Yeah.
It's huge.
Yeah.
It's huge. And they're saying, And that's so interesting, and that's why I'm using the word victimhood, like victimization in one way, is what they're surprising. There's three things that happen through social media. Number one is, we know, the idea is comparison.
Yeah.
That's very damaging, and because we show our best life on social media, we don't, and anybody can have a great life, and
the filter that we show. Yeah.
And the idea of this, and the second one, which is very effective, is the idea of find things that make you feel alive. Just like we have to feel things, and I understand it's true that feelings are good in one way. God gave us emotions, but the idea that everything should be good all the time is something that puts us down, because I don't feel good all the time. I don't feel good all the time. I don't know if you feel good every day. I feel discouraged sometimes, and actually sometimes I'm just wondering. My whole life is put back in perspective. Okay, am I doing what God wants me to do? Nothing is moving over here, So it's serious. Like, discouragement is a serious thing, and if anyone who is in leadership doesn't tell you it happens, they are lying. Because it's one thing that leaders feel is loneliness in making decisions, and discouragement because everybody have a tendency to tell you what's wrong and rarely have a tendency to tell you what's right.
Yes.
So we have this reality, but on the other thing, what was the most interesting thing to me in the study was what they call mimetism, is reproducing somebody else's behavior. And it's interesting because you have these influencers on social media that went through that study in France that were encouraging people to burn their skin to feel alive. That was one example. So what they're saying is that with this, the study showed that today to have an identity that is trending, there's a few things you have to do. So you have to be non-binary, otherwise you're the part of the problem. So the generations before the Generation X was 5% people identify themselves as non-binary. In the Generation X is 20%.
Oh wow!
Like it's 4 times. It went from the Boomer 3% to it went up 2 points in 3 generations, and went 4 times in one generation.
Wow.
So, and they're saying, well, there's this. And the other thing is also feeling depressed and having all kinds of mental issues is trendy. That's the problem. And the thing is, it's deserving their health. It's also deserving the ones who really have some issues.
There are people that do have legitimate mental health disorders.
And people say nobody does that. Well, look, Google it and see how many people fake cancer to have attraction on social media. It happened. It's not like billions of people, not hundreds of, but it does happen. So what am I saying? The idea is that what becomes dangerous for our young people and even ourselves is the idea if I'm victimized in one way, if I'm a victim in something, that gives me an identity that I get self-support that I wouldn't get without it. And that is something I need to be aware of. And that people might say, hold on for a second. There are victims out there. Yes, that's my point.
Yes.
So when you are actually faking the fact you're a victim, you're not helping those who are.
Yeah.
But then the worst thing in the article is when you're faking that you're one, you're becoming one, because now your health issue is a problem.
Wow.
So by speaking about this and pointing out the issue, we're actually saying something very important, that we care about your health, we care about your mental health, and sometimes we have to understand how dangerous those things are. So why are we in a mental crisis? A mental health crisis right now? Well, that's one of the reasons.
Yeah, it's like this feedback loop of I'm a victim when I'm not, but I hear it so often that I convince myself that I am, and then I am stuck in this endless feedback loop of this. And there's a book that I've read about that idea of having a feedback loop of, it's called Soundtracks, I think is the name of the book. And it's just, we repeat the same things over and over in our head, and how much those things that we hear or those things that we mimic, the more that we mimic them, they develop in our brains or in our physiological aspects of us, whether it's the neural pathways or the chemicals being released in our brain, where I feel the dopamine kick when I post something on social media, and I get that. And I don't want to just focus on social media, but just in general, our brains are wired. We have these pathways that develop. Our brains are adjusting to stimuli, and we are developing those neural pathways, whether they're positive or negative in our minds or in our brains, that our body physiologically reacts to particular stimuli depending on what they are. And then in this example that you've given of maybe victimhood, or I say that I have a mental health issue because I want to get the reaction and the response from somebody that cares about me, or if nobody cares about me, then I get it from people that say they care about me on social media or some other way. And then my identity becomes sourced in that victimhood that I've established, where now it's not a disorder or not something that I have where I could say maybe I have anxiety, or I have bipolar disorder, or I have PTSD. Now it becomes what frames my identity and who I see myself as. That now this is what makes me me, which I don't want to make this, discredit this, or like we said, there are real physiological things that happen in our brains and that cause our bodies to respond a particular way. And some people have it to a certain extent and others. But in these different feedback loops that we have, or this different ways that we view ourselves, we have tried to appease our physiological responses. And that's what a lot of these treatments and these ways of dealing with it, as from a physiological or medication perspective, is trying to just not cover up, but like give those responses that your body naturally has less impact, or cause you to not have those same triggers in your environment or in your space as a result of the medication that you're taking. Yes. And we can see that, and in the articles that I was reading in preparation for this, we could see that these medications and these things that are developed and have been prescribed to different individuals aren't necessarily a fix for your anxiety or a fix for your bipolar disorder or whatever, PTSD or all those things, but they are a treatment that's meant to mitigate the symptoms of that thing. And what I want to say, we want to say, is that it's, there are the physiological aspects, but there is more to it than just physiology, I think, because and I was talking about this with my wife in relation to this, that I can go to the doctor and say, I have anxiety, I have depression, I have all these things. And the doctor is basing the prescription or the treatment that they recommend based on my description of what is being explained to them. How severe or how little I make of the situation that I'm in. I'm not going to, balance every statement that I make, but I think we understand that there are those real situations. But I say to the doctor, I'm feeling really anxious, I'm feeling really depressed. And the doctor says, okay, on a scale of 1 to 10, but there's not a concrete test necessarily. I'm sure they have their protocols and their processes for that. But it's really based on my subjective feeling that I'm having maybe in that moment or in my discussions with my doctor. And they have their practices, like I said, but I could see it where a patient is understanding the process and the protocol that's being determined by the physician, and they can maybe play the system where I know, and I've had conversations with people where they're like, they ran out of medication for some reason and they needed to get new medication, and there was only certain medications available, and they're like, oh no, that's not going to help me. I need this medication. So like a patient can become so aware of their treatment that they are actually prescribing themselves with their own medications to help their own mental health, which is in some ways can be a scary thing to think of as far as treatment for the mental health. But I'm saying that in a way to say that the medications are a way to mitigate the symptoms of it, but are there other factors that are going into this mental health crisis that we don't really consider because it's not necessarily a medical, we say, oh, this is a medical issue, so I need a medical resolution to or medical thing to fix this, when there's other factors that are contributing to this mental health. Do you see that also?
Completely. I think, what we're saying, again, we don't want to do a disclaimer every sentence. We understand that there are real issues that need professional help. We get that. But they were saying is, the question we're asking today, can we as friends make a difference? And the answer is completely yes. Whether you're in the world of medicine or psychiatry, psychology, every counsel will tell you, so a support system around you makes a difference. And that's what we're talking about, the friends. So as Christians, what can we bring to the picture?
Yeah.
right? That's the question we're asking. Well, I cannot bring my own experience unless I went through what you went through.
Yeah.
But that does that disqualify me of being your friend if I didn't go through what you're going through? And the answer is no, it doesn't disqualify me. Of course. So because the love I can have for my friends, the care, the support, whatever I do, in many ways, concrete, the love that I can show, that makes a huge difference. Now, the question we asked earlier when you and I were preparing, this morning, is just wondering the question. Okay, and it's a question that I do ask every time someone goes through something difficult, and I understand that. And it's interesting when you have conversation with friends or people that you have these conversations. It's easy for people who are suffering to not want to hear anything spiritual because, okay, I know the truth, but that doesn't help. So that's the other extreme that we were describing earlier. One is hyper spiritualizing everything, and the other one is not bringing God into the picture
at all. Yeah.
And
the medical thing versus spiritual. Yeah.
Right. And the one thing that I ask all the time is, do you think God has something to say to you in that situation? Yeah. It's a very simple question, and I want an answer in one way. It's a yes or no question. If you're saying no, then there's very little I can do in one way except being your friend, which I can't. I don't have to bring a verse to feel good about myself.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, if you answer yes to the questions, you also believe with me that God has his thoughts that are higher than our thoughts. And that opens the door for a real conversation on the other aspects of our issues.
Yeah.
Do you think God cares about your mental health? Do you think God cares about your situation? Do you think God has anything to say in this situation? And that's when I think we can make a difference as Christians and as friends, is that by being an objective outside voice in the situation, maybe I can help my friend, in a concrete way by bringing in, words and thoughts and verses that are not in the situation right now that could make a difference.
Yeah.
And that's what we're advocating for today.
Yeah. So one thing that you said that was I think an important thing is the thought that I could have as a friend of someone who's struggling, am I qualified to speak into whatever the situation is in their life? Do I feel like I am qualified to talk to my friend about their mental health? And maybe we can reduce ourselves. We can say, I don't think I need to say something because I'm not qualified, because I don't have a degree, because I don't know everything there is to know about this particular thing. So we as friends can disqualify ourselves and say, I can't talk to them about this. It's bigger than me. And that we'll talk about when to seek professional help later on a little bit. But then, as a friend, I can disqualify myself and say, I'm not going to talk to them about this because it's beyond my depth maybe, or I don't know what to say or whatever it is. But also as a person who's struggling with mental health, I could not want to hear from somebody who I don't see as qualified to speak into it also. So in both directions, there has to be this level of what are the qualifications for me to speak in and to let somebody speak in to my life? Because if I don't feel qualified, I'm going to hold back what I think is and really in my care and my love for my friend, I shouldn't have to, obviously if that's my goal is to care for my friend and help them in their mental health, I shouldn't be worried about stepping on their toes maybe, or saying something too harsh, or, whatever the case is. And in the same way, as somebody who is seeking help, I shouldn't feel like this person isn't caring about me and I disqualify them from help. Because then in that instance where I am the one who's struggling, then I feel more isolated. If I can't talk to my friends and I can only talk to my therapist or my psychologist or my psychiatrist or whoever it is, I'm not living my life with my psychiatrist or my therapist.
Yeah.
I live it with my friends or my family. And if I don't talk about that with them, how can I really experience any type of mental health, like a healthy mental life or a healthy life, unless I'm living with my therapist and they're able to respond and help me in every instance? It's kind of part of our community dynamic that we've been designed for in these relationships, to be able to, coming with the baseline of I care about you and I love you and I want to understand what you're going through from a friend who's helping somebody with mental health. And in both ways, like, I want you to understand what I'm going through and vice versa, so that it can be something beneficial, so that we can care for one another and love one another and help one another. Help me understand what you're feeling, and help so that I can help you in what you're feeling. And I think, I don't want to go on too much, I feel like I've been talking a little bit long, but it's good. We can be so ready to give an answer for someone. Like, if I'm a friend and I'm trying to help, they're having a mental health crisis or situation, whether they're anxious or depressed or worried or whatever the case is, we can have in our hearts this desire to help them or fix them or fix the situation. And in doing that, we, instead of listening to what they're saying, instead of understanding what they're going through, we're just waiting for our opportunity to give a solution to the problem, which we've already just said that we're not qualified. In one sense, we have that as like, okay, did you try this? Have you tried that? Which I'm not saying that we shouldn't give those suggestions, but we shouldn't assume that we have all the answers, but that we should listen to what that person is going through, what our friend is going through, so that we can really have the empathy, have the ability to see where they're at, so that we can think about it and giving maybe our advice or our response, but maybe that's not what's needed in the situation. Maybe I don't need to give them a checklist of things to do to help their mental health every time we talk. Maybe I can just let them say what they're feeling, and I could say, that is a strong feeling, and right now maybe that's all that I need to do in that moment. I don't need to give them a checklist of what to do. And maybe that's not super practical, but I think in some ways it is, like listening and hearing what they're saying instead of waiting for opportunity to speak or to be able to give an instruction, which we're so prone to do, especially when it's somebody else, but we're so prone to disregard or ignore when it's somebody else giving it to us. You know what I mean?
Yeah, which is a natural thing to do. I want to go back to what you said about disqualifying, sometimes the other ones, in one way, because I think it's also a tendency that I find sometimes disturbing in social media or even the younger generation. And I'm saying this because I'm spending a lot of time with them by the nature of the ministry that I'm doing, and that's the same for you. Is like one thing that I see a lot as a tendency, which bothers me, is like, how people are encouraging others to cut people off from their life when they don't encourage them to do what they love. It sounds very simple, right? Okay, well, these are toxic people. It's a new trend. We have so many toxic people around you. If they don't dream with you, then let them go. They don't deserve you. And by doing this, sounds like a good concept in one way. We're getting rid of toxic people. Hold on. Who are you calling toxic?
Yeah, toxic.
The friends who loves you and tells you what you don't want to hear, but you need to hear? If that you call toxic, then you're cutting off yourself from really important, loving input. And that's why we have you. So I just wanted to say that, but I want to go back to what you said at the end. What were you saying really is like, don't shy away from loving people who are in need, especially through mental health crises that we know about, and just think that maybe God could use you in very, very simple and practical way to make a difference in people's life. Who does not respond to love? Who does not respond to care? Something that a therapist can't really provide. That is why if someone goes through therapy, it's fine. Of course, you have counseling and we get that, but then don't shy away as a friend who knows who someone is going through something. Then you have a role to bring yourself as a friend and to bring God into the picture as well. Because we cannot, on one way, as we said earlier about the medical aspects of things, like I cannot accept the idea that someone would think that God has nothing to do with the mental health issue. He has no solution for it. As a Christian, I cannot think this way. And I understand what you're saying. We don't want to spiritualize. And again, we go back to what we said earlier. Somebody who's going through serious grief or serious issues, we don't want to, say giving him a pat in the back and 3 verses is going to be okay. It won't. We get that. Agreed, 100% agreed. But on the other hand, is thinking that no pat in the back, no love, no verses will still make a difference. We're wrong. We have something to bring as friends into the picture, and we shouldn't shy away from this.
Yeah, and I think like we had the verse, they read it yesterday, but in Philippians 4, like what we are thinking about, not being anxious for everything, in anything, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, letting your requests be made known to God, like having that willingness to bring those things before God. And I think in some of these instances and in some of the mental health crises that we experience, like I was saying, there's different factors that come into play in how I perceive and how I experience, how those thoughts are triggered in my life, and how do I acknowledge or recognize those things. Like we can see, or you can tell in a situation where somebody is having a mental health crisis, they're having a mental health issue, and they go to a doctor and they get prescribed something. Then they go back into their environment and they expect this pill to change their mental health, which in some cases, maybe that is the case. But I would say there's other contributing factors that are, that affect my mental health. Like you were saying, social media, the comparison, those dynamics, the things that I am consuming, whether it's through podcasts or through the news or through my environment at home, stimulants, other type of stimulants, whether it's alcohol or some drug or any of those types of things, and just the overall environment that I'm living my life in. It's important for us to see those factors and how they can play a role in my mental health. And in Luke chapter 5, we have this interaction, or we have this description of Christ. And I was talking with my wife before, and I was just trying to kind of get some thoughts around this. But even Christ had to, I think, for his in the midst of what he's doing in his ministry, lots of people, lots of stimulus, lots of oppression, lots of people coming against him. It says in Luke 5, verse 15, how the report went around concerning him all the more, and great multitudes came together to hear and to be healed by him of their infirmities. So he himself often withdrew into the wilderness and prayed. Yes. And I was just thinking of this, like in the treatment for, let's say somebody has a manic episode or has a mental health breakdown, we say, you bring them to a place, facilities that wherever they are. And usually there is a process that facility takes, yes, where they will either, depending on the severity of the situation, they'll have that person isolated. Yes. And they'll have them put by themselves. They'll have a treatment plan. They'll have, work that they recommend that the patient does, but usually it involves separating them and reducing the amount of stimulus that could impact that patient. Usually the rooms have nothing on the walls. Usually there's a lot things to prevent triggers from taking place. And a lot of times we want to have the relief from these mental health things or this anxiety or worry that we have, but we're not willing to withdraw from the environment that maybe is triggering it because of, for whatever reason, we don't want to hurt somebody, or we don't want to change something about our environment or the people that we're around. And in turn, we are actually putting ourselves willfully into a situation where our mental health is hindered, where, okay, that pill didn't work, I need a different one. We're not going to say it again, but I think that the environment that we're in and the people we have in our lives play a big role. Like we were saying, the people that I am giving that I'm qualifying to speak into my life, do they care about me, or are they just trying to fix me? And the environments that I'm in, are they conducive to a healthy mental life, or is it, we're all just have mental health issues, and we all just commiserate around our own mental health issues, and we wonder why no adjustment, no changes in those things, and maybe it doesn't take much for those adjustments to be made, where I can, maybe I'm not going to do this now. Maybe I'm going to turn this off. Maybe I'm going to change the places that I go. And it can be difficult for us to do that, I think, because of the, groundbreaking changes it could require in my life to make that happen.
The article I was mentioning earlier that I read from France, one of the things is actually exactly what you're saying as a solution. And I found myself to say this to a lot of people, that are stressed, is learning how to say no. But the one thing they were saying in the example, they're talking to parents of those kids, younger ones, and they realize, do you know how much busyness a busy parent brings a stressful child? That's the equation.
Yeah.
So the solution is, parents, slow down. Don't tell your kids to slow down.
Yeah.
You have to slow down.
Yeah.
So, and they're saying one of the reasons why, so parents are replaced by social media, but that the parents wouldn't replaced by social media if the parents would slow down. So we can't blame social media as being the problem. We are actually blaming, and not blaming, but we're saying parents have a big responsibility to be present.
Yes.
And in today's world, like we're so busy because we always want more, right? Because what we're talking really, it's a third world problem in many ways. Like we're talking about people who have everything, in the Western world, and still we have a major mental health crisis.
Yes.
So the point is, and I see the same when I talk to young people. They're growing up, and then the family situations. Maybe you're looking at this, and one thing that they really, there's the kids who have less but spend more time with their parents are more grateful than kids who have more who spend less time with their parents.
Yes.
Simply put, right?
Yeah.
So slowing down, having this process of being a little less triggers is actually very helpful.
Yeah.
And so can I go to my friends and help them see the things that are triggering, for them, the things that just don't help.
Yeah.
So of course, like if they disqualify me because I'm telling them that their victimizations of themselves is not helping, I'm not trendy, so I might be shut off. But I might also be very helpful because I'm saying, like, if you go down that route of the self-inflicted wounds that we're talking earlier in that article, you are going to be harmed. You're going to be harmed at some point.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be, you know what I'm saying? So the point is, like, these are real serious help. I saw a couple, comments. One of them was like food. It's interesting. Sugar is poisoning people's mind. And actually, it was interesting in the same article they were saying one of the things also, because they look at all the factors. One of them is food that is now what they call over-hormonized. There's many more hormone growth in food than ever before. And what the result is, like 20, 30, 50 years down later, is the puberty arrives earlier in children. So when they're supposed to be children and develop their imaginations and innocence, they are becoming adults earlier. So their body is not synchronized with their mind.
Yeah.
So because the frontal cortex, which is the latest part of the brain, gets developed from until the age of 25 to 28. So they're having a normal growth. You're having a full body. Your brain is not finished, but you're going through puberty, and then you're not ready because you're still a child. All these things are messing people. So yeah, food has a big influence in that way. Yeah. So could I just tell could I just be practical and look at that and say, hey, maybe you should look it up. Maybe the way you eat isn't helping either. So as a friend, I can have some of those conversations. Yeah. And the other thing was, like somebody, Brigitte says, you're having friends who don't have the same experience or mental conditions are getting their feedback could really get from subjectivity and bias. I agree with that. I don't have to be, if I'm in depression and I'm listening to you and I'm telling you I don't want to have anything to do or hear anything you have to say because you don't have depression. Well, does that mean that my therapist needs to be depressed to give me an idea? So why do I disqualify my friends and I don't disqualify my therapist? So we got to think about this way. And again, I'm thinking, as friends, let's not shy away from helping our friends, and seeing God into the picture. I think this is very important.
Yeah, I think it is too. And I mean, one thing that you were saying about the food, sugar, and that aspect, I think like one of the other factors in our mental health is, the physical. We're talking about physiology as far as, a medication that can help fix or, mitigate the symptoms that I have. But what about like my actual physical, the things that I'm doing physically? Am I exercising? Am I getting enough sleep? Am I eating foods that are that give me the right nutrients that I need? Like, are those factors being, and I'm sure there's a protocol and there's probably that dynamic when it comes to, assessing and, prescribing and all those things. But there is like a holistic, it's more than just, give me the pill that I need. And I don't think that we necessarily all think that way, but I think that some people do look for the solution in whatever they're being prescribed by their doctor, when there are many things that can help me mitigate some of these things, whether it's Like I've already said, my environment, my home life, my relationships with people, the expectations I have at work, the stressors that I have at work, my diet and exercise, my sleep patterns, all of these different things can contribute to my mental health and can drain my mental health, so that I am looking for solutions in other places, and then not even adding into the fact the social media dynamics and the things that are berating me on a daily basis, whether it's through the content that I consume, electronically or otherwise through radio or podcasts or whatever it is. So I think that is a huge thing to consider when we're thinking about mental health. And going back to, like, as we're helping practically our friends, having an openness, having an understanding and a vulnerability with them, that I'm not just trying to fix them, but that I care about them and I want them to be well. I want them to be well mentally, right? And, Romans 12, Verse 2, the renewing of our mind, right? We are transformed by the renewing of our mind, going back to that feedback loop of negativity that we can fall into. This is who I am. I'll never get out of this. I'm always going to be this way no matter what happens. I got every pill that I try doesn't work. All these different things that we can fall into. We can help each other in that, to address those negative thoughts and say, that's not true. We can say, that's not something that is helpful for you to think about yourself. That is not something that is kind for you to say about yourself. And those are the things that I think, am I allowing somebody to say those hard things to me? Like, this is not who you are. And this, going back to what you were saying about hyper-spirituality and the medical or humanistic viewpoint, is that those truths that I need to break that feedback loop are found in Scripture and found in what God has said. And those truths, if I understand them and know them to be what they are, which words that will never pass away, words that are eternal, words that are impactful, then they will help me break that feedback loop, as opposed to me as a friend telling you what you want to hear in the moment.
Yes.
Like saying, oh yeah, I'm sure and we just commiserate around this negativity or this feedback that is not true and not kind and not helpful for me. But if I open up that door to, God has said these things about you, that He cares about you, that you are not alone in this mental health crisis that you're in, that God knows the thoughts that you're thinking, and God's thoughts are greater than our thoughts. And that these truths are, like, it goes back to our view of God. And if we believe who God says He is, which is a whole, we've had podcasts about that. But if I am trying to solve a mental health crisis or help my friend in a mental health crisis, there has to be something bigger than me that can help me out of that.
Yes.
Because I can't pull myself up out of the ditch. I can't help myself get out of the feedback loop. I need God, and I need someone who cares about me to bring God into that if I can't see it for myself, in order to help me in that mental health crisis. And I think that's, something that, like we said, we can disqualify each other from helping us.
Yeah.
And maybe we want to have that identity of nothing helps.
Yeah.
No one can, I've tried everything and nothing helps.
Yeah.
And it becomes who we are, that I'm always depressed, I'm always anxious, I'm always worried, and this is just who I am. But there are people in our lives that care about us, and first and foremost, there's a God who created the heavens and the earth, who knows the way you're wired, who knows the neural pathways in your brain, and knows the tears that you cry and the hairs on your head. And He does want you to have a healthy mental life, a healthy experience in this life, and He wants to know you. So, yeah.
I think one takeaway, we can think about as friends is, okay, so, people might think sometimes when I'm, like talking to friends implies that the friends will belittle the depth of my depression or whatever. But I understand that. What we could say is, I think we're belittling God by thinking this is one aspect of life that He cannot help me with. And I think in a way it's surprising to me in the conversations. I'm always very careful, but I'm also very straightforward. It's like if I think when I go through things that God cannot do anything for me, then then I'm actually disqualifying him as well as disqualifying my friends.
Wow.
And that's something I have to be careful about, you know. And so I mean, that's a good way to finish. You know, what's the room? What is the question we could ask as a friend? You know, can I be helpful in a mental health crisis? Yes, I can. I can bring the love, the support. I can bring the wisdom. I can bring God's thoughts into the picture. I don't want to belittle your situation, but I don't want to belittle God thinking He doesn't have place in this conversation. So I think that's one takeaway from today, right?
Yeah, amen. I mean, don't disqualify God.
No. God
can do all things, and nothing's impossible for Him, but sometimes we can get in that feedback loop of, you know, God can't do it. This is the only solution. Wow, that's so good. Let's not disqualify God from the mental health crises that we are experiencing, and let's care about one another and look to care for one another, listening and not trying to fix, not belittling, but encouraging.
Yes.
And going to the one who can really help us, who can really take care of those crises that we're experiencing.
Yes.
And that's God. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Well, thanks for joining us today. Make sure you subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and all the other places. Be sure to check out the rest of the episodes this week as we talk about mental health.